everyone. So my hubby's home and I'm getting a bit of help with Mason, and that is great news because it means I can get some filming done. So I thought today I will review Anna Mason's Watercolour World book for you. Anna Mason is well known for her hyper-realism and very sort of photorealistic botanical art. And if you look at a certain object or that she has painted, like it could be a fruit, it could be a flower, then it tends to be that you think it's almost a photograph. In fact, there are a few paintings in this book which I showed to my husband, and he just wouldn't believe that it was painted. He thought it was a photograph. In this book there is a mix of actually just regular botanical art mixed in with hyperrealism. Like, again, when I'm looking at this right here, I can see all these marks, but I think when you actually zoom out a little bit and look from a distance, the way that Anna Mason paints is that she uses a very small brush, quite detailed, and then basically creates these little marks that from a distance it makes it look like a shadow and a realistic kind of texture, but when you look at it up close, you can see all those marks which aren't actually that sharp, but it really depends on the actual illustration itself. Let's have a look at the contents. So we've got the inspiration, the approach, the painting method, the projects, and keys to improving. So it is a nice content in this book. Let's have a look at the next one. So here's a great example of her hyperrealism. So this literally looks like a photograph in real life, and when I look at the screen right now, it looks even more realistic. So it's done very kind of sharp and meticulously. So it is the apple that you would see is what you see on the paper. So basically it's like taking a picture in a way. So it's not going to have it's a style within itself, but it's not going to have a botanical let me actually, just as a comparison, pull out another book. Let me show you an example of this other book and the apples here. So this is from the Botanical Sketchbook by Marianne Scott and Margaret Stevens. And, you know, side by side, hopefully you can see that it's a different style. And although this is botanical art, but it's more kind of stylized and made into illustration rather than this very realistic approach. So here is Anna Mason, and what's really inspiring is that I think she worked for 8 years in the government, so she always had interest in painting and colors and all of that, and probably like most of us, she was encouraged by her family to go and do a serious, as I call them, serious degree at university, and so she didn't go down the artistic path of life, and then she started to, I think, take parts in some competitions that are quite big, and she won awards, and gradually she decided to turn this into her full-time job, and she left her government job, which I'm sure she's enjoying a lot more. And yeah, so the whole inspiration comes from, you know, being in the garden, loving gardening, observing different flowers, how they grow, and so she's a keen gardener, and that's where her interest comes from, and then obviously the inspiration within that. So there's some beautiful photography here. And again, so this is another example of her hyper-realistic paintings. The scale of them are rather big, and this is probably what helps for it to look so realistic. She's not spending time on something small, but she sort of blows it up, and we'll see later on. So this is actually says here 40 by 30 inches. So that's how big this is. So basically meter and 2 centimeters by 76 centimeters. That's how huge this piece is. So one of the pairs is sort of this size that she's painting. And then she can really go into the detail because it's a lot larger, so she can scale onto it. So here we go again, some beautiful, rather realistic strawberries. It almost makes you want to touch it, kind of lift it from the page, doesn't it? So let's have a look. She's giving advice on photography, so photography tips, how to take photography for botanical art, you know, what to look for, what backgrounds to create. So that might be helpful for those of you who are starting on this subject matter. And let's see, what else do we have here? Here is another piece. So this one is not as big, but still quite big. And you see how beautiful these apples are. They're just so juicy. They're so vibrant that they're kind of jumping off the page. I mean, compared to my hands, you see how big it is. The actual size is 46 centimeters by 61 or 18 by 24 inches. Just to give you an idea. So here is a good perspective to see how big the sunflowers were compared to her hand that she is painting. She talks about color mixing, and she also shares what colors she has in her palette in case you are interested. I think she uses predominantly Winsor & Newton, I think. So here are the sunflowers. Here are her brushes, and I know a friend of mine who I mentioned before. She tried her watercolor brushes and she really loves them. So it's great for that sort of small detail, you know, very kind of tiny little dots and all of that you can achieve with her brushes. They kind of have that bit of a triangle effect, so they're not very long, they're kind of shortish on the hair front, and then they kind of have this shape of a triangle where the bottom bit, so usually a watercolor brush, just to give you an idea, it tends to have a belly. So if I would wet this brush, it would go from a small base to a bigger, wider belly and its tiny little tip, right? And hers actually have the widest point at the bottom where the bristles are based, and then it goes into a tip. So that's what helps her to achieve that hyper realistic style. I actually was thinking of purchasing her brushes at one point, just out of curiosity, but I'm not really into hyper realism myself when it comes to painting. And here is a blackberry as well, that's super real looking. Here it is in the big size. And then exercises for practice. So here she is talking about or she's kind of trying to inspire you to get some work done. So this is Tulip Rococo, beautiful tulip, making practice happen. So she's giving tips on that. So here are gorgeous irises. This I quite like, so Anna recommends to have time for tea breaks. So that's her little secret or tip of having a little break with her tea. And she says you always come back feeling refreshed and kind of looking at something that you haven't looked at for 10-15 minutes gives you a new fresh look, and you can instantly see what you need to correct, rather than when your eyes become tired and you look at the same area and you kind of stop seeing certain elements of it. So that's a great tip, and obviously a very enjoyable one too. And here we go, look at this quince. So this is 61 by 46 centimeters, or otherwise 24 by 18 inches. Beautiful quince. I love the fact that there is this sunshine coming through on the quince, and the huge big leaf, and you can see how much detail there is. You know, if you were painting a small leaf, there is only so much you can paint, but imagine blowing it up to this size where you have to cover all of it. It is quite remarkable, really. And this is a beautiful piece, Cherry Blossom. Stunning. And what's interesting, here at the end of the book, there is outline drawings. So she gives you that blackberry, the autumn leaf, and let's see what else. There's something else here. Oh yeah, the sunflower and the garden bird. So she gives you 4 images that you can trace, and you know, that takes off the drawing part out of it, and you can just do it from there, and that is it. So very nice book. Has quite a bit of everything, and I like the fact that it has prints of her large work, and very inspiring. I mean, even if it's a bit too much as a project, you know, I could never embark on a size like that. I could never paint on a huge size like that, but still, nonetheless, it is helpful to see how she's doing it on such a large scale, and perhaps bringing it down to your scale will help you as well, just to see how she does the patterns, how she works. When it's so big and you can see every brush stroke, you know, you kind of understand what she had to do, how she had to paint to create that hyper-realism, and maybe you can employ that in your own smaller sized pieces as well. So thanks for watching, and see you soon.